Yeah, so we are recording this webinar. And so, yeah, so welcome to today's webinar on social media analytics. My name is Hillary Mohop. I'm the social media strategist and inclusion manager for Conservation Voters of Pennsylvania and New Jersey LCB. And my co-host this afternoon is Rita Yelda from the Coalition for the Delaware River Watershed, and I will let her introduce herself and CDRW in more detail in just a moment. We're really excited to have you all here with us today. And so, like I mentioned, please feel free during the course of this webinar to add questions in the chat box. If you have any issues with technology, please add those notes in the chat box as well. And you may notice in the upper left-hand corner of your Zoom screen, there is a little red box that says live and says, Otter AI live notes. That is an in real time live stream transcript of what is happening in the webinar. So if that would be useful to you, please feel free to click on that. It'll take you, open up browser on your computer, so you'll be able to follow along with the transcript if you would like. So before I pass it over to Rita to get us started today, I just wanted to briefly tell you a little bit about Conservation Voters and the work that we do in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. We're an environmental advocacy organization. Both New Jersey LCV and CVPA are state affiliates of the League of Conservation Voters. And the work that we do in the Delaware River Watershed is to support organizations build connections with their constituencies, and so that they can make changes and address policies that protect clean air and clean water. And we provide support through webinars like this, as well as one-on-one social media support, promoting events that you are having to our email list and to our social media audiences, and also providing some additional organizing support. So please feel free to reach out to me at the end if you would like to know more about any of that. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Rita.
Great. Thank you, Hillary. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today on our social media analytics webinar. I'm excited to be here with all of you. So I am the Outreach and Communications Manager for the Coalition for the Delaware River Watershed. The Coalition for the Delaware River Watershed is a coalition of about 160 organizations throughout New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Delaware that are working for a better watershed. So we work primarily on moving forward environmental advocacy and public policy. But there's a lot of other resources that we provide for our members, like our communications work group. So our communications work group is open to any of our member organizations. So if your organization is a member of the Coalition for the Delaware River Watershed, you are able to join our communications work group, and it is a wonderful place to be. We always are sharing resources. We put together social media materials. We put together educational events like these webinars. And it's a good way of talking to other either communication pros that you want to get some feedback from, or even just, maybe you're the only person at your organization wearing multiple hats and you do communications and policy and outreach and all this other stuff. It's still a good place for you to be, because there's a lot of things that you can learn from us, and a lot of skills that could be picked up. So as Hillary said, I'm going to go through my presentation. There's a little bit of a Q&A. And then Hillary is going to also talk a little bit more about social media analytics. I'm primarily going to be talking to you guys about goal setting and sort of the purpose of social media, and some of the things that can be accomplished with it. So as you have any questions, if you have any questions as we're going through, you can go ahead and put that in the chat box, and we will get to that during the chat portion of today's webinar. So let's get into it. The first thing I want to talk about is, let's see if I can get this screen to go to the next slide. Okay. There we go. All right, so let's talk about analytics. So When you log into your social media account, there's a whole slew of numbers, right? There's so many different things that you could be paying attention to. Sometimes it can be a little bit overwhelming. So why use analytics? Let's talk about that for a second, because without measurement, you cannot improve your social media feed. Measurement is really the first step, as this quote so eloquently puts it. Measurement is the first step that leads to control and eventually to improvement. If you can't measure something, you can't understand it. You can't understand it, you can't control it. If you can't control it, you can't improve it. And I mean, that's really important, right? Because we want to make sure that what we're putting out there on social media is the best content possible. And how can we really do that if we're not measuring? We don't know what our starting point was. How can we know what our end point is? Okay, so let's talk about the ladder of engagement. So really the purpose of social media, the purpose of social media for our organizations is really to get people to do something else. Social media is really a starting point. So oftentimes when we talk about social media, we talk about it in this kind of idea of the ladder of engagement, where social media is the starting point. It's really the first place that somebody, a member of the public, somebody in your audience might engage with your organization. So it's definitely not an end point. Ultimately, you want to move somebody from liking a post on your page to buying a product or volunteering with your organization or donating to your cause. We want to move social media followers through what's typically called this ladder of engagement. So consume would be, the content. So you're posting content out there. Maybe it's a picture, maybe it's an article, infographic, something like that. You're posting out your content, and that's the consume portion. People are seeing it, they're consuming it. The next is to discuss. So that would be the next thing in the ladder of engagement. So that would be people commenting on the post, sharing the post, downloading whatever it was you posted. So it would be kind of the next step, right? It's not just them passively seeing it, it's them actually commenting, sharing, downloading. Then the contribute is another step above that. So that would be somebody, of one of their followers, providing knowledge or time, or sharing something with their network, sharing a post and telling people to also take action. And eventually you want to move people up to lead, where they're actually inspiring other people. They're taking part in, the community that your organization has built. They're helping to organize events. Maybe they're helping to sell items, whatever it is. I mean, you really have to think about sort of, for your organization, what is the consume, discuss, contribute, lead, ladder of engagement look like? But really, that's what we want to be doing, is we want to get people from being these kind of passive consumers to actually inspiring, to lead. So for example, like a Facebook like would be discuss, a retweet would probably be discuss. If you posted a poll online, which you can do very easily through different social media avenues, you can, that would be considered contribute. So if you're asking people, do you like to bike or do you like to run in your neighborhood? That would be considered contribute, because they're putting forth something. Yeah, and so essentially you want people to go from like low input to high input. And a donation would probably be considered contribute. If you wanted people to come and host a day-long cleanup, something like that would probably be lead, right? Or if you want them to become a board member or take on some larger action within your organization, that would also be lead. So again, it's really dependent on your organization and what it is you ultimately want people to do. But just remember that social media isn't the end, it's just the beginning. Let me go to my next slide here. All right, so let's talk about SMART goals and metrics. I'm sure you've all heard of SMART goals before. And yes, we use them when we talk about social media as well. So social media can be used to put a tangible human touch on the work our organization is doing. It can turn followers into advocates. It could get others to share our messaging. We can turn our followers into donors. We can turn our donors into evangelists for our organization. Social media can also be used to build relationships with like-minded and influential brands and bloggers. It can encourage donations and fundraising efforts. Social media can enable mobilization, including driving people to read and share your website content, having users sign a policy petition, or buying a specific product. Just remember that successful social media communications occurs through thoughtful strategic planning, setting these measurable SMART goals, and committing to consistent posting. You will not reach your goals if you are posting once a month. It really does need to be consistent, and your audience needs to see that. Before you know which social media metrics you need to track, you need to know what your organization's goals are. So don't compare your metrics to other organizations. Instead, you want to compare your metrics to yourself now and then yourself in the future. You want to determine what your organization needs to be tracking based on where you are now, and then what you hope to achieve in a specific time period. So your goals for social media should be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. How much do you want to accomplish over what period of time? So let's talk about some potential goal areas. So this is just a list of some potential goal areas. I adopted this from a great resource, TechSoup's Nonprofit Social Media Starter Kit. So this is a list of potential goal areas for your social media posts. It's by no means an exhaustive list, but it can get those brain juices going and determining goals for your social media. So maybe it's brand awareness. So that would be the extent to which consumers are familiar with your organization's identity. Maybe it's community engagement. You want to focus on building your community size and providing content through which you can generate a two-way, thoughtful, engaging conversation. Or maybe it's content distribution. You want to have a focus on expanding the reach of your organization's content. So that could be blog posts, infographics, what have you. Maybe it's lead generation. You want to use social media to identify potential customers for your products or services. You want to generate some names and emails for marketing purposes. You could use social media for that. You can also use it for fundraising or revenue. So you might have a focus on turning your followers into donors or supporters, moving them up that ladder of engagement. Customer support, a focus on responding to customers or constituent comments, good or bad, on social media. A lot of businesses use their social media accounts for quick customer support. If somebody has an issue with a product or an item that they may have purchased, that is a good way to get it out, to get people talking to you. Ooh, sorry. Okay. Influencer marketing. This is also, social media can be used for building relationships with people who can build relationships for you. So I think that if anybody on here uses Instagram, I think we're all familiar with influencers that show up in your feed that have 1 million likes on their posts, and it's just, a person that has an opinion about something. So influencer marketing is definitely a possibility. Also media relationships. So with social media, you can engage directly with press and build media relationships yourself. That's especially true on Twitter, where you can send press, you can find reporters and send them some direct messages. And then social listening. So this is another potential goal area. Maybe you want to track and analyze what's being said about your organization on the internet, or you want to determine trends. It's interesting to see, especially, the kind of comments that people leave on things, to see what their attitudes are about, XYZ article that we may have posted. And I think the same can be said about, comments on other posts and other pages. So you might even be using social media to go find out what people think about specific trends or your organization or a topic. So again, like I said, this is not an exhaustive list. This is just to kind of get those brain juices going in determining goals for your social media. All right. So after you've chosen some goals for your social media, you want to make sure that you're choosing the right platform to meet your goals, because there are different audiences and different benefits to the different social media platforms. So the three that we're going to talk about today is Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Of course, there are many other kinds of social media out there, you know, Snapchat, YouTube. So let's talk about this for now, just because we only have a limited amount of time. So for Facebook, the benefits of using Facebook is it is a destination where conversations are already happening. Almost 70% of adults use it. So you have the ability to create your own events, you can shop, there's live video. It's really good if your goals are brand awareness, community engagement, content distribution, lead generation, fundraising, or social listening. Facebook is the place for all of those things. And more, you're able to really reach people by joining Facebook groups, which is a whole nother part of Facebook, but it's also really helpful to see what people are talking about in some of the groups. So on Twitter, the benefits of using Twitter is it is a destination for breaking events, a lot of conversations happening on Twitter, a lot of real-time updates from well-known figures, celebrities, the president. We know all sorts of people who are on Twitter saying things, and it ends up on the news. There's also the goals. If your goals are brand awareness, customer support, media relationships, influencer marketing, and social listening, Twitter might be the right platform for your organization. And then we have Instagram. So the benefits are high use among millennials and Gen Z. It allows for direct community engagement and influencer marketing. Instagram is huge for influencer marketing. 76% of the users are 18 to 29. 76% of users age 18 to 29, visit it daily. It also does skew younger. So if you're looking to reach a younger audience, that might be the place for you. It's also good for brand awareness, community engagement, and like I mentioned, the influencer marketing. So again, you want to set the goals for your social media based on what your organization cares about. And I cannot stress that enough. It's not really a one-size-fits-all sort of thing when it comes to tracking analytics. So let's talk about how this actually looks. So let's say that your goal area is brand awareness. And our case study here is, so let's say you have a rock and roll museum and you're launching a new 6-month exhibit on the Clash. So your applied goals would be to grow your museum's Facebook page by 40 followers a week based on a punk music content. I'm sorry, that's supposed to probably say contest. So you start a Twitter chat with the hashtag The Clash and increase the number of users tweeting that hashtag 10% every month. So your metrics would be follower growth, reach a brand specific, I'm sorry, I have a typo in here. Campaign hashtag tracking and increase in mentions. And so you would essentially, this is like brand awareness and trying to track brand awareness. By starting a social media contest or a Twitter chat with this specific, The Clash. If you want community engagement, so let's say that you have a local shelter and you want to put a human face on those suffering from homelessness. One thing you might do is put together some behind the scenes photos that you can use for Facebook or Instagram, and then maybe have a mission driven question on your Facebook page, one per week, where you're asking people to have a conversation with you. And that might help you see an increase in likes, shares, comments, mentions, and obviously replies, so we're having conversations with people. If your goal area is customer support, so your nonprofit is selling t-shirts or memberships or something like that, or magazines, then you want to make sure that your applied goal is to get back to customers within X amount of hours. Facebook actually tracks that, and if you respond quickly to your emails, you get like a little badge on your Facebook profile. So really your metrics that you want to be tracking in that is the number of questions you get and then what your response time is. So like the metrics that you're tracking, again, I don't know how to stress this enough, need to be connected to your goal area. Really trying to figure out what is my goal area, what do I want to accomplish, and then tracking the right metrics for what you are trying to accomplish. And all right, so after you figured out all of your goals and what you want to track and all of that stuff, you just want to keep in mind that you should be analyzing your findings regularly. This will allow you to improve your social media content to grow towards your goals. So for example, after analyzing the data, you might notice that your page followers aren't responsive to posts about politics. Or you may notice that your posts with interesting pictures are getting clicked on the most. Listen to your audience and do more of what's working and less of what's not working. What posts are people just going by, they're not clicking on, they're not responding to, and they're not engaging with it anyways. They're not giving it a like, they're not commenting on it. And Hillary is going to talk a little bit more in a second about what all of the different metrics mean, so you know what you need to be tracking. But really you want to listen to the data. One thing that I learned by analyzing like our social media analytics for the Coalition for the Delaware River Watershed is that a lot of our followers, especially on Facebook, are located in Philadelphia. And that's something that you can find out from your analytics and the data that they all have. There's a lot of different stuff that you can find out. And so what I decided to do is to have, I noticed that our posts that talked about the Delaware River, specifically the waterfront in Philly, were performing really well because a lot of our followers were in Philly, and that kind of local messaging really spoke to them. So that was really helpful for me. Another thing that I learned about, I learned by analyzing our social media data is that our followers really like good news, which really surprised me. I don't know, maybe I'm too doom and gloom, but I always thought that, you know, bad news obviously gets a lot of responses. You see people clicking and commenting on like a bad news article on Facebook, but good news also performs really well. Our audience responded really well to news about restoration, additional funds for on-the-ground projects, anything that was uplifting, people are very responsive to. And your audience isn't going to be like my audience. Your audience is a unique set of people, so you really need to figure out what speaks to them, what doesn't speak to them. Learn from the data you're tracking. Actually have a place where you can write down where you are now, determine how often you want to track your metrics, and how often you want to analyze your data, and then what are your recommendations based on that analysis. So that's what I have for you for today. Do folks have any questions?
If you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. So Rita, Erin has a question that is, what is the difference between discussing and contributing in the ladder of engagement? Is contributing strictly online engagement only?
Yeah, contributing is, so discussion is just online only. So discussion would probably be, you know, sharing a post, commenting on it, liking it, whereas contributing would be them taking a larger role to help your organization. It would be maybe coming to an in-person event, hosting, you know, some kind of movie night at their house for other supporters. It would be taking a much bigger step. And so that's really like the ladder of engagement, is you want to get people from seeing a post to liking a post to talking about the post to then coming to your events to then, you know, maybe even becoming a board member, hosting an event in their community. Again, it depends on what your organization's mission is and what you're trying to accomplish. But always keeping in mind that social media is just a starting point. It's not where people should end, right? We want to keep people engaged with us and keep moving them up.
Cool, thank you. And then the other question in the chat box right now is, from Zoe, and the question is one that is a great segue to the next part of the presentation. And the question is, where is the data on the followers on Facebook? Like you see more followers from Philadelphia. And so we're not gonna specifically look at that tab in Facebook Insights, but I will show you where Facebook Insights is in just a moment. And so if you are in Facebook Insights, there's a menu on the left that is people, and that will allow you to do some breakdown of your fans, your followers, the people reached, and people engaged. And I'll show you where that is on the menu in just a moment.
Do folks have any other questions before I pass it off to Hillary? Hillary is going to talk about what all of the different stuff means and all of the different data that you can gather. All right.
It looks like there's one question, a follow-up question from Aaron, which is, do you have any recommended data resources that might be useful for convincing colleagues that Facebook isn't the only worthwhile social media platform? What I know that Rita, in the follow-up to this webinar, is going to send out four different links that have some information that might speak to that. But Rita, if you want to respond to that question.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it really, again, it depends on what your goals are. If your goals for your organization don't match up with what Facebook can do, then you should go ahead and explain why, maybe Instagram is a better format for what it is you're trying to do. Again, it really depends. Like if you're trying to put on a photo contest, probably the best place for that would be, someplace that's more photo based, like an Instagram. But Facebook is great for having conversations and seeing what people are talking about. I get a lot more responses on our posts on Facebook than I do on like a Twitter, for example. So it's definitely much more conversational. So I think, first you need to figure out what are your goals for your organization, and then you can pivot to the fact that, okay, well, this platform is going to be better for this goal. So maybe you're trying to reach younger people, and so Instagram is the place for you. So really just trying to figure out what your talking points will be, what your argument will be for why a different platform is better for what you're trying to accomplish. And sometimes it's even just presenting the fact that there's different audiences on different platforms. You're going to get different age groups. You're going to get different demographics when it comes to gender. So it really, and it fluctuates all the time too. It's interesting to see how some of the people using Instagram now are becoming older, and then all the young people are kind of going to Snapchat. But you can find that data online, when it comes to like who's using Instagram, who's using Twitter, and that can help you make your argument. Okay, so I'm going to pass it off to Hillary. Hillary, take it away. Let's learn about practical analytics.
Yeah, cool. So Rita has given us a really great overview of why it's important to have goals, and how you can translate some of the social media metrics to match communications and organizational goals. Now I'm going to walk you through the analytics that are available to you through Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram's platforms. It's going to be just a really quick overview so that you have sort of a lay of the land. You can get more nuanced data from third-party sites like Hootsuite or Sprout Social, but there is a lot of information that's available to you for free on these sites, and it's a really great place to start to set a baseline for you for tracking your success, and to figure out what those goals are and what you want to track in order to meet those goals. So just as was previously mentioned, we'll take we'll have time for questions at the end, but if you do have a question about a particular slide, especially if there's something you see that you want to know a little bit more about while we're on the slide, please feel free to flag that in the chat, and Rita hopefully will get my attention, and so I can speak to that. So like I said, I'm gonna walk through the analytics dashboards for Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. But before I do that, I just wanted to give you a little bit of a disclaimer, which is that we're going to see a lot of data and a lot of possible things that you can track, and it can be overwhelming. It is overwhelming. It can be really hard to know what to track when to track it, how often to track it. And that can be especially true if you don't feel like you have a lot of time to be spending crunching the numbers, filling out an Excel spreadsheet, or downloading, the forms that you can download, and trying to figure out, just like that previous question, what everything means and why your organization ought to care. So different metrics relate to audience awareness, engagement, conversions, the steps on the ladder of engagement that Rita walked us through. And a fourth kind of metric relates to your audience and what you can know about them. So we're going to be talking, about reach and impressions and these other engagements. So I just wanted to briefly walk through them before we got into the dashboards. So post reach means the number of people who have seen a post since it went live. It's probably one of the easiest metrics to find on all three platforms, and even easier to understand. It just means the number of people who have seen your post. And why you might want to measure that is if your boss or someone comes to you and says, I want to reach more people. So you can determine whether you're reaching more people by tracking your reach metric. Impressions are in some ways very closely related to reach. Impressions are the number of times a post shows up in someone's timeline. For a post that has a high number of impressions count, but a low engagement number, which we'll talk about in just a moment, and it means that post was really interesting. People saw it a lot of times, but it wasn't interesting enough for the people you were trying to reach to take some kind of action after they saw it in their feed. Engagements boils down to how much your audience is interacting with your account, and how often they're doing that. So this is likes, comments, shares. And you measure it because you want to identify people who really care about, the work that you're doing and the things that you're posting about and the issues that you care about as an organization. So you might, depending on what your overall goals are, you might, pay more attention to comments or shares. It just sort of depends on what you're interested in. And you might know, as a person who, uses social media as a normal human being, you might be sitting on your couch scrolling through, Facebook, and you see a post and you're like vaguely interested in it, but it's another hurdle to write a comment on it. So engagement can be really important for identifying people who are willing to go over that hurdle for you. Link clicks is how often people click on whatever link is in your post. So if you want to drive more people to our particular website, link clicks is the metric that you would be looking for. Engagement rate is a kind of a tricky thing to define, and I'm gonna apologize in advance that there are some nuanced differences in the definitions of engagement rate, and one of the links that we're gonna send after this webinar kind of breaks down the different kinds of engagement rates that you might be interested in, depending on the goals that you have, or the things that are important to you in your organization. The very basic definition that is used by Twitter is that it is the number of impressions and divided by engagement. And so that you use that if you want to figure out the average impact of your posts. Actually, I think I wrote the math down wrong. It's engagements divided by impressions. And so, and then there are some standard social media practices that actually define engagement rate as the rate at which followers engage with your content. And so for that percentage, you do the total of engagements on a post divided by the number of your followers on your account, and you multiply that by 100. And that again is those formulas are in a link that we're going to send around to you. The number of posts, pretty straightforward. It's the number of times that you post in a period. You might be curious about that if you are not sure if you're posting enough, if you think you might be posting too much. Obviously, if you are looking in the month of March and you have, 10,000 impressions, and then you look in the month of April and you have 8,000 impressions, is that difference because your posts just weren't as great, or was it that you posted half as many times? That's a key thing to pay attention to. Followers are the number of people who like you. This is an important metric for organic reach. So if you don't have the budget to boost posts on Facebook, then you want to build as much organic reach as you possibly can. So you want to reach as many followers as you can. Growth is the number of new people who like you. So that helps you if, when your boss or someone else says, how do we reach more people on social media? You look at growth. And then we've talked a couple of times about location, and that can be helpful, as Rita really nicely illustrated, if you want to make sure that the posts that you're posting are relevant. So if you find out that most of your followers are in Philadelphia, you're probably gonna maybe post less about Pittsburgh. So and the good thing about, before we jump into each of the platforms, I just want to say up front that Facebook and Twitter allow you to download the data. So export the data. You can see in the upper upper right hand corner of this graph, this screenshot, it says export data, and that will let you pull some of this information so you can deal with it in an Excel spreadsheet and not have to mess around so much in here. And so if you are not familiar with how to get to Facebook Insights, when you are on your Facebook page that you are an admin for, right at the top, right in the middle, underneath where it says facebook.com/your page name, there will be some tabs above there, and one of them will be Insights, and you click on Insights and you will land at this dashboard, which has a page summary that automatically pulls data for the last 28 days. You can change that to for slightly longer times and slightly shorter times, so you can play around with that. And those actions on the page views and things like that change while you're doing that. Mention that. Page views, just to quickly walk through the data that is available on this main dashboard that might be useful to you. Actions on the page are if people have clicked on the little blue button which is in the upper right hand corner of your page to donate or sign up for your email list or find out more information. Page views is exactly what it sounds like. It's the number of times people have viewed your page. Page previews are people who have not come directly to your page, but it may have shown up on their phone as and offering them to go check out your page, but they haven't actually made that jump to go look at your page. Page likes is a growth metric. Post reach is that the number of people your posts in that given period have reached. And post engagements, which is right underneath there, which got cut off a little bit in my screen shot, is the number of times people liked, commented, or shared. And as I mentioned previously, there's on this dashboard there are there's a left-hand menu that allows you to dig deeply into a number of different things, your followers, your likes, learn more about your reach, your posts. And if you go fourth from the bottom, people, that's where you can find out about, the breakdown of your followers in terms of geography, languages spoken, gender, and a number of other things that might be useful to you if you want to get down into the weeds. If you go to that menu and click on the followers tab, you'll be able to see up at the top, you'll be able to manipulate the times just as you can on the main dashboard. So you can say, I want to look at the activity of followers in the last week or the last month or the last quarter, or totally customize your data range. Down below that is a way to look at the total page followers as of today, or of the day that I took the screenshot. And that can be helpful just to get a view of growth over time. Are you are there spikes in follower growth, or they're in pretty steady growth? Reach, similarly, you can manipulate the time period over which you're looking at your stats for your post reach, and down below you can see oh, I went backwards. Sorry, guys. Down below you can see sort of overall day-to-day organic reach and paid reach. You can see that we had a couple of spikes in paid reach because we were running some ads. And so that's really helpful to see if your paid reach boosts your organic reach, which it can do, or if they're not related, or if that might speak to other things that you're doing on Facebook. You can also, I'm just going to back up really quickly. So on the left-hand corner or left-hand menu, you can also go down into the weeds of post level, the metrics on particular posts, which might be useful if you're doing a campaign on related to a particular organizational goal. You might want to know how those posts individually work. And so so when you look at the post level, it'll give you a little bit of the date and the time that the post was posted. It'll give you a little bit of a preview of that post. And then it will let you know if it's a link, a video, or an image. And then it will let you know what the reach of the posts were. And then it will let you know what the likes and comments are on that post. So you can get a good bird's eye view of posts over time on this level. And if you like the way a post is working, or if you want to make it work a little bit better, Facebook always likes to take your money, so you can boost it right from here. So now we're going to jump over to Twitter. And if you're not familiar with how to get to Twitter, if you are logged into your Twitter account, you simply go to your browser and type in analytics.twitter.com, and it will bring you to your dashboard. If you go to analytics.twitter.com and you are not logged into a Twitter account, you can log into your Twitter account there. It's pretty straightforward. So like Facebook, you get a dashboard that gives you a 28-day summary. And as you scroll down through this this dashboard, you can, it'll give you the 28-day summary, and then it will tell you about June. And if you keep scrolling, it'll tell you about May, the top tweet and the top mention, and the top media tweet, which can be useful If you want to know, who are the important people who are talking about you that you might want to reach out to for some kind of influencer campaign, like it would be good to know, like if George Scott is talking about us and is our top mention for multiple months, I'm going to reach out to him and say, like help us meet some of our goals. You seem to like us. There, if you dig a little bit deeper into Twitter, you can get down into the impressions on particular tweets, not just your top tweets. And so in that tab on Twitter Insights, up at the top, it'll give you an overview for that 28-day period. You can also customize that period of time. And so what it'll show you automatically is up at the top is the number of impressions, and down below in those like gray bars are the number of posts. So that's really useful to know, like did you get a spike on June 11th because you posted, many more times than usual, or was there a particularly successful tweet when it came to impressions? And so down below, underneath that chart, there's just a running list of all your tweets, and you can sort it by top tweets, so you can see what the most successful ones are by, I think it defaults to defining successful tweets by impressions. And here's one of those places where it just gives you engagement rate right up front. And an 11.3% engagement rate for Twitter is pretty good. So we were happy about that. And that means that the people who were seeing the tweet engaged with the tweet that meant that they responded well to it. And then just one more thing I wanted to highlight in Twitter Insights is on that main dashboard, there's a running list on the right side for your chosen period of time. It'll highlight for you the number of likes, replies, your engagement rate for the 28 days, which is nice to know your average engagement rate for the month, and the number of link clicks and the retweets. And that's data that I keep track of. I actually keep track of all this data, or I have in the past, just as a way to like measure the way that we're engaging with our followers. And so I'm just going to quickly run through Instagram Insights in the interest of time. I think we're a tiny bit behind schedule. So I just want to offer a disclaimer about Instagram Insights. If your Facebook and Instagram accounts are connected, you may actually be able to access your Instagram Insights from your Facebook Insights. Rita can do that for CDRW. I cannot do it for CVPA. Their updates and upgrades happen in stages, and so maybe you are one of the organizations where you actually can get that. But if you're in your Instagram account on your phone, you click on the hamburger menu, it opens a window for Insights. And if you click on that, it'll give you data about content, activity, and insights, audience. So you'll be able to see the number of posts that you post in a week, the number of accounts reached in that period of time. And it also gives you a helpful bar to say which days those people were reached. And then it also breaks down your audience by age range and gender. So just to wrap my part up a little bit, and just to reiterate what Rita said at the beginning of this webinar, you need to approach your analytics with your goals in mind. And it can be, like I said, overwhelming. And before you get lost in the weeds of all of that possible data and a whole lot of spreadsheets, you need to ask yourself, what do you want to know and why? when you can answer those questions, you'll know which metrics will be the most useful to you, and you'll know what you want and need to know. So just as like to get, because I can feel this question coming, I wanted to just like give you a sense of what good metrics were for each of these things that I mentioned at the beginning. So when we're talking about reach, your good reach for a post depends on the size of your audience, whether you were talking about organic or non-paid posts, or paid posts. Your good reach is the number of people who could have possibly seen your post versus the number of people who actually did see it. For some organizations, reaching 1,000 people will be amazing. And for some people who have, a very large Facebook page, that will be terrible. And so this is, in my opinion, reach is one of those metrics where you need to like get an internal baseline. In terms of the number of times you post, right now there's sort of a nonprofit industry standard that you post on Facebook once a day, on Twitter twice a day, and Instagram basically once every other day. There are lots of organizations like us who post more than that, and there are lots of organizations who post less than that, but that's sort of an industry standard. Here's where engagement rate this is a little bit of a different engagement rate calculation. These rates listed here reflect a median across nonprofits in 2020, and it's calculated by engagements divided by the number of followers. So it's the number, not like, let's say you have a post that got 7 likes and comments on it, and you have 250 people who follow your page. Your engagement rate for that post is 7 divided by 250. And similarly for Twitter and Instagram, you can see that the medium engagement rate for Instagram is quite a bit higher than Facebook and Twitter. If you want to know what your good metric should be for followers, compare yourself with competitors, compare yourself with other organizations on this webinar. That's a good way to just set a baseline so that you know how much you should be growing. Sort of nonprofit industry standard for growth right now is that your Facebook page over a period of time should grow about 4%. Twitter should grow about 2%, and Instagram should grow about 6%. And then before we jump to questions, I just wanted to give you an example of how we track our metrics. We do it monthly. We track net page likes, the number of times we post, total overall impressions, and then break that down into organic impressions and paid impressions. Because we've been doing a couple of video campaigns, we track the total video views, we track total number of engagements, and then the overall engagement rates. And there are, some month, your organization might be focused on different things in different months. So I have a notes row to remind me of the things we did that might have affected a given month. And these are the links that Rita is going to send to you at the end of this, our webinar together.
Yes, and you will all get a recording, as we mentioned earlier, of the webinar. And it looks like we do have a question for you, Hillary.
Yes.
So the question is, where is the data on followers on Facebook, like that demographic data where you can see where people are located?
Yeah, so I mentioned that briefly. It's in the left-hand column. If you are in the left-hand column in Facebook Insights, you go to the People tab.
As you're going to go onto your organization's page and then go into the Insight.
Right.
Cool. Do folks have any other questions? We're almost at 2 o'clock. But do folks have any other questions? Looks like we got one more. Somebody wants to know, is it possible to get a copy of the presentation itself?
Sure.
Yeah, I can upload the slides as well. That's a good idea, Shahad. Yeah, okay. So the last thing that I do have one question for you, Hillary. So you shared with us some of the data that you track, should all organizations be, like, is there a specific number of data points that we should be tracking? Does it make sense? You know, should we be tracking 10 different data points, or is it okay to just do 2 or 3?
Well, it depends on what your goals are.
Good point.
It's always going to be my answer. I mean, there are some, like, that's our sort of our master, like, overview for the accounts, like what we're tracking for those, and we do those on a monthly basis because, frankly, that's what I have the capacity to track on a regular, consistent basis. But there are campaigns that we do that, I need to know week to week whether they're how they're performing, and if we need to do something else to boost the performance so those numbers are a little bit better. And so I track them somewhere else, track slightly different things, and track them weekly. So the answer is, it depends on what your goals are, and it depends on what you can consistently do, because it's consistency in tracking that will allow you to actually, like, make sense of the numbers.
Okay, great. Thank you, Hillary. So we're right at 2 o'clock. I don't see any other questions in the chat box. Thank you to everybody who was part of this today. Thank you so much, Hillary, for sharing with us all this great information as well.
Thank you, Rita.
Woohoo! All right, everyone check your email because you'll get copies of everything. Thank you all. I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.